Have you ever found yourself stuck, endlessly thinking about a task, but never actually starting it? You're not alone. The truth is, waiting for motivation to strike is a losing game. Motivation is fleeting. Sometimes it shows up, but often it doesn't. Successful people don't rely on motivation. They rely on action. Taking action, especially when you don't feel like it, is the key to creating momentum. But how do you get started when your mind is telling you to wait, procrastinate, or avoid? That's where strategy comes in. In this episode, we're diving into 10 powerful strategies designed to help you take action, no matter how much resistance you're facing. These aren't your typical just do it cliches. They're practical, surprising, and, most importantly, effective. Whether you're dealing with a daunting project at work, trying to kickstart a fitness routine, or simply fighting off procrastination, there's a method here for you. So, if you're ready to break through hesitation and finally get things done, let's jump into these actionable strategies. Because sometimes the best way forward is to stop thinking and start doing. Strategy 1. Anti-motivation approach. When it comes to taking action, most people wait for motivation to show up. They tell themselves, "I'll start when I feel ready." The problem? Motivation is fleeting. It comes in waves. Sometimes you feel inspired, but often you don't. Waiting for that perfect moment to strike usually means waiting forever. The harsh truth is that successful people don't wait for motivation. Instead, they build a habit of acting regardless of how they feel. This is where the anti-motivation approach becomes a game changer. The principle is simple, yet powerful. Do the thing you feel resistance toward. Resistance, that inner friction or hesitation, often signals that the task is meaningful or necessary. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wisely observed, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the tasks you're avoiding, the ones that seem difficult or uncomfortable, are usually the ones that lead to real progress. Think about it. How many times have you procrastinated on something only to find that once you finally started, it wasn't as bad as you imagined? That's because starting breaks the mental barrier. Once you push past that initial resistance, momentum kicks in. It's like trying to push a heavy boulder. Getting it moving takes effort. But once it's rolling, it becomes much easier to keep going. Let's make this actionable with a simple exercise. Next time you catch yourself delaying a task, try this. 1. Identify the task that you're feeling resistance toward. 2. Tell yourself, "I don't need to feel ready. I just need to start." 3. Break the task down into the smallest possible step, something so tiny it feels impossible to resist. If it's writing, open your document and type a single sentence. If it's exercising, put on your workout clothes and do one push-up. If it's making a difficult call, simply dial the number and see what happens. The key here is removing the expectation of motivation. You don't have to feel inspired. You don't even have to feel good about starting. All you need is to begin. Action creates its own energy. Once you begin, you'll often find that motivation follows, not the other way around. Another way to frame this approach is to think of action as a muscle. Just as your physical muscles grow stronger with regular use, your action muscle strengthens every time you push past resistance. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes second nature. You'll no longer wait for motivation. You'll act because it's who you are. To reinforce this mindset, remember the words of Seneca. Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life. This wisdom reminds us that life is happening now, not in some future moment when we might feel more inspired. The opportunity to make progress is always present, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. In summary, the anti-motivation approach is about breaking the myth that you need to feel ready before you start. Resistance is a normal part of any worthwhile endeavor, and pushing through it is what leads to growth. Each time you act despite feeling unmotivated, you're training yourself to become someone who gets things done, no matter the circumstances. Strategy 2. Rejection. Mindset. Fear of rejection is one of the biggest obstacles preventing people from taking action. Whether it's applying for a job, asking for a favor, or starting a new project, the fear of hearing no can lead to hesitation, avoidance, and procrastination. But what if you could shift your mindset and turn rejection into a goal rather than a fear? That's the essence of the rejection mindset strategy. It's not about avoiding rejection, it's about seeking it. At first glance, this might sound counterintuitive. After all, isn't rejection something we're supposed to avoid? Not exactly. The idea is that by deliberately exposing yourself to rejection, you build emotional resilience, reduce the fear of failure, and ultimately increase your chances of success. The more you put yourself in situations where rejection is a possibility, the less power that fear holds over you. Consider this. Imagine you've been postponing making a difficult call, whether it's a business pitch, a sales inquiry, or even a request for help. You're delaying it because you're worried about being rejected. Instead of focusing on the outcome, whether they say yes or no, set your goal to simply make the call and experience rejection. Shift your mindset from "I need to succeed" to "I want to face rejection." This takes the pressure off the result and reframes the act itself as a win. Ironically, when you do this, you'll often find that rejection happens less frequently than you expect. This approach isn't just theoretical. Many successful people have used it in their journeys. One famous example is Jia Jiang, who spent 100 days intentionally seeking rejection by asking for outrageous things, like asking a stranger to borrow $100 or requesting a refill on a burger at a fast food restaurant. Through this experiment, he discovered that rejection wasn't as scary as he once thought, and in many cases, people were surprisingly open to his requests. More importantly, he built the courage to take bold actions without being paralyzed by fear. Here's how to apply the rejection mindset strategy in your life. 1. Set rejection as your goal. Instead of aiming for success, aim to collect rejections. Make it a game. Try to get as many no responses as possible. This removes the emotional weight from rejection and makes it less intimidating. 2. Track your attempts. Keep a simple log of situations where you put yourself out there, regardless of the outcome. Over time, you'll notice that what once felt terrifying becomes routine. 3. Celebrate the act, not the result. Each time you take action despite the fear of rejection, reward yourself. It's the effort that matters, not the outcome. Think of rejection like lifting a heavy weight. At first, it feels impossible to handle, but with each repetition, you grow stronger. Eventually, what once felt heavy becomes manageable, and soon you're lifting with ease. The same principle applies here. Exposing yourself to rejection builds your emotional muscle and makes you more capable of handling difficult situations. Another way to reframe rejection is by thinking of it as data. Every rejection provides valuable feedback. Maybe your pitch wasn't clear enough, or perhaps your timing was off. Instead of taking it personally, use each rejection as a learning opportunity to refine your approach. Over time, these small improvements compound, increasing your likelihood of success. In the words of Seneca, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Rejection isn't the end of the road. It's a step towards something better. By embracing rejection, you free yourself from the fear that holds you back and open up new possibilities for growth and achievement. So the next time you hesitate because you're afraid of being rejected, remind yourself, rejection is part of the process. Every no brings me closer to a yes. By adopting the rejection mindset, you'll not only take more action, but also develop a level of confidence that few people possess. Strategy 3. Reverse timing. Have you ever noticed how a looming deadline can suddenly push you into action? There's something about the pressure of running out of time that forces us to focus, eliminate distractions, and get things done. That's exactly the principle behind the reverse timing strategy, creating a sense of urgency by setting a countdown timer rather than a traditional deadline. Here's how it works. Instead of thinking, I need to finish this task by the end of the day, you say, I have exactly 30 minutes to complete as much as I can. By flipping the way you perceive time, you activate your brain's natural urgency mode, which helps you focus intensely on the task at hand. This approach works particularly well for tasks that feel overwhelming or tedious because it removes the pressure of perfection and shifts your mindset to one of action. Why is this effective? Our brains tend to procrastinate when we feel like we have unlimited time or when the task seems too large. But when you introduce a ticking clock, you trick your mind into prioritizing action over overthinking. It's no longer about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing something within the allotted time. This simple mental shift reduces hesitation and increases productivity. Think about a scenario where you need to write a report, but you keep putting it off because it feels daunting. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment to start, set a timer for 20 minutes and commit to working on the report until the timer runs out. You don't have to finish it, just make progress. Once the timer rings, you can stop, or if you're feeling motivated, reset the timer and keep going. This method creates momentum, making it easier to continue once you've started. Here's a step-by-step guide to applying reverse timing. 1. Set a clear, short time frame. Choose a duration that feels manageable, 15, 20, or 30 minutes. The goal is to create a sense of urgency without overwhelming yourself. 2. Eliminate distractions. Before starting the timer, close any unnecessary apps or tabs, mute notifications, and create a focused environment. 3. Focus solely on progress. Don't worry about doing things perfectly. Focus on making progress within the given time. Remember, you can always refine your work later. 4. Evaluate and repeat if needed. Once the timer ends, take a moment to reflect. If you've made progress, great. If you feel motivated to continue, set another timer and repeat the process. The beauty of this strategy lies in its simplicity. It breaks down large tasks into smaller, time-bound chunks, making them more approachable. It also helps combat the anxiety that often accompanies starting something big by giving you permission to focus on short bursts of effort rather than the entire task at once. Another benefit of reverse timing is that it enhances your ability to enter a state of flow, a mental state where you're fully immersed in the task. By limiting distractions and focusing for a set period, you increase the likelihood of getting in the zone, which boosts both productivity and creativity. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." While this may seem like a heavy thought, it's a reminder that time is finite. By using strategies like reverse timing, you learn to respect and maximize the time you have, rather than waiting for the perfect moment to act. In summary, If you find yourself procrastinating or feeling overwhelmed by large tasks, try flipping the way you think about time. Set a countdown timer, start small, and focus solely on progress. You might be surprised at how much you can accomplish in a short burst of focused effort. So, grab a timer, pick a task you've been putting off, and start the countdown, because sometimes all it takes to get moving is a ticking clock and a little urgency. Strategy 4. Do the impossible act. Have you ever faced a task that seemed so overwhelming you didn't even know where to start? You might have told yourself, "There's no way I can get this done right now," and then postponed it, waiting for a better time that never came. Here's the truth. Sometimes the best way to overcome hesitation is to tackle something so bold and seemingly impossible that it shocks your mind into action. This is the essence of the do the impossible act strategy. The idea is to start with a task that feels almost ridiculous, something that your brain interprets as extreme. Why? Because when you begin with something audacious, ordinary tasks suddenly seem manageable in comparison. It's like lifting a weight that's heavier than usual. After attempting the heavier load, the regular weight feels easier. For example, imagine you need to write a report, but you keep procrastinating. Instead of setting a modest goal, tell yourself, "I'll write the entire draft in one sitting." At first, this might sound unrealistic, but that's the point. By committing to an impossible or illogical act, you push yourself to take action without worrying about perfection. Even if you don't finish the whole draft, you'll likely make more progress than if you'd stuck to your usual cautious approach. This strategy taps into a psychological principle called overcommitment to trigger flow. When you set an audacious goal, you bypass overthinking and dive straight into action. The pressure of doing something seemingly impossible forces your brain to focus intensely, silencing distractions and hesitation. Here's how to practice the do the impossible act effectively. 1. Choose a bold starting point. Pick a task you've been avoiding and set a goal that feels a bit outrageous, whether it's reading a chapter in 5 minutes, finishing an entire presentation in one go, or cleaning your entire workspace in 10 minutes. 2. Ignore perfection. The goal isn't to achieve flawless results. It's to break through the inertia that's been holding you back. You're aiming for momentum, not mastery. 3. Commit fully for a short period. Tell yourself, "I'll give this my absolute best shot for X amount of time." Even if you don't complete everything, you'll make significant progress and, more importantly, build the habit of starting without hesitation. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're learning a new language, and the thought of mastering hundreds of vocabulary words feels overwhelming. Instead of slowly working through a few words a day, set an audacious goal. "I'll memorize 50 words in 30 minutes. Even if you don't hit the exact target, you'll likely memorize far more than you would have, using a slower, more cautious approach. The beauty of this strategy is that it changes your perspective. By starting with something bold and challenging, you remove the pressure to be perfect and focus on action instead. Once you've begun, ordinary tasks suddenly seem easier and more achievable. What once felt overwhelming is now just part of the process. Marcus Aurelius captured this idea well when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The strength here comes from realizing that your mind often exaggerates the difficulty of tasks. By flipping the script and attempting something impossible, you take control and prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. So, the next time you're stuck, try this. Instead of easing into the task, Challenge yourself to do something bold. Aim for what seems impossible, and watch how quickly hesitation fades. Even if you don't achieve the impossible, you'll accomplish far more than if you'd done nothing. Remember, it's not about achieving perfection. It's about pushing your limits, building momentum, and proving to yourself that you can take action, no matter how daunting the task may seem. Strategy 5. Option elimination. Have you ever sat down to start a task only to find yourself distracted by countless other options, different tabs on your browser, endless apps on your phone, or even the sudden urge to reorganize your workspace? The truth is, too many options create decision fatigue, making it harder to focus and take action. That's why the option elimination strategy is so effective. It's about simplifying your environment and reducing choices to force yourself into action. When you have fewer options, your mind naturally becomes more focused. Think of it like this. If you're standing in front of a buffet with dozens of dishes, it's harder to decide what to eat compared to when you're given a single, well-prepared meal. The same principle applies to tasks. The more choices you have about how or when to start, the more likely you are to procrastinate. The key to option elimination is to intentionally limit your choices, making it easier to take action by reducing the number of possible distractions. This doesn't mean eliminating everything. It means narrowing down the tools, environment, and decisions to only what's essential for the task at hand. Here's a practical approach to applying this strategy. 1. Choose your primary tool and stick to it. If you're writing, use only your writing tool. Close all other tabs, apps, or software. If you're working on a presentation, open only the necessary files and resources. By eliminating everything unrelated, you create a distraction-free environment that encourages deep focus. 2. Set clear priorities. Before starting, decide on one specific task to focus on. Instead of thinking, "I need to work on this project," break it down into a single actionable step like, "I'll draft the introduction." By narrowing your focus, you reduce overwhelm and increase clarity. 3. Create a minimal workspace. Cluttered spaces lead to cluttered minds. Clear your desk of unnecessary items, leaving only what you need to complete the task. This simple act sends a powerful signal to your brain. It's time to focus. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're working on a report, but every time you sit down, you end up switching between checking emails, scrolling through social media, and researching unrelated topics. Instead of letting yourself be pulled in multiple directions, eliminate your options. Close all tabs except your word processor. Put your phone in another room and tell yourself, "For the next 30 minutes, my only option is to write." You'll be amazed at how much more productive you become when distractions are removed. This strategy is particularly effective because it reduces what psychologists call cognitive load, the mental effort required to process information. When you have too many options, your brain has to work harder to decide where to focus, which leads to fatigue and avoidance. By limiting your choices, you free up mental energy to focus on what truly matters. Getting started. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This wisdom applies perfectly to distractions. External distractions don't control you unless you allow them to. By eliminating unnecessary options, you take control of your environment, reduce stress, and create a mental space conducive to action. In summary, option elimination is about simplifying your environment and focusing your attention on what's important. The fewer choices you have, the easier it becomes to act. The next time you feel overwhelmed or distracted, take a moment to eliminate unnecessary options and watch how quickly you gain clarity and momentum. So, clear your space, narrow your focus, and give yourself only one option to start. Strategy 6. Ask for self-permission. Sometimes the biggest barrier to action isn't the task itself, it's the inner dialogue that keeps us stuck. We overthink, question our abilities, and delay starting because of an invisible resistance in our minds. What if, instead of battling that voice, you could bypass it entirely by doing something as simple as asking yourself for permission to start? The ask for self-permission strategy is exactly what it sounds like. Verbally or mentally, asking yourself for permission to begin a task. This simple act creates a mental shift, turning hesitation into an intentional choice. Instead of waiting for motivation or the perfect moment, you actively grant yourself the freedom to start right away. Why does this work? Because much of our resistance comes from feeling like we're being forced into something, whether by external pressures or internal expectations. When you ask yourself for permission, you take ownership of the process. You're no longer reacting to an obligation, you're choosing to act, which makes the task feel less daunting and more empowering. Here's how to practice self-permission. 1. Speak out loud. If you're alone, literally ask yourself, "Can I start now?" Use a friendly or playful tone, as if you're gently nudging yourself forward. It might sound silly, but it works by breaking the cycle of overthinking. 2. Answer positively. Respond to yourself with something simple like, "Yes, I can start now." This reinforces the idea that you're in control and capable of taking action. 3. Take immediate action. Once you've granted yourself permission, do something, anything, that moves you closer to completing the task. Even a small step, like opening your laptop or writing the first sentence, creates momentum. Imagine you've been procrastinating on cleaning your workspace. Instead of dreading the task or telling yourself you should do it, try this approach. Say out loud, "Can I start cleaning now?" Then answer, "Yes, I can start now." Immediately after, take one small action, pick up a single item, and put it away. You'll likely find that this small start makes it easier to keep going. This strategy is especially useful for tasks that trigger anxiety or perfectionism. By framing the task as something you're giving yourself permission to do, you reduce the mental friction that often accompanies starting. It's no longer about meeting a rigid standard or expectation. It's about allowing yourself to make progress without judgment. Marcus Aurelius offers a similar perspective in his writings. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Asking for self-permission reminds you of this power. You're not a passive victim of circumstances or emotions. You have the ability to choose your actions, even when they feel uncomfortable. Another benefit of this strategy is that it builds self-compassion. Instead of harshly criticizing yourself for procrastinating or not doing enough, you're engaging in a supportive inner dialogue. You're giving yourself the same gentle encouragement you might offer a friend who's struggling to start something. Here's a quick exercise. The next time you find yourself stuck or hesitant, pause and ask, "Can I start now?" Answer positively, then immediately take one small step. You'll be surprised at how quickly this simple act can break through mental resistance. In summary, the ask for self-permission strategy is a powerful tool for overcoming hesitation by turning action into a conscious choice. It removes the pressure to be perfect, reduces overthinking, and makes starting feel like a gentle nudge rather than a daunting leap. So, next time you catch yourself delaying, don't wait for the perfect moment. Simply ask yourself, can I start now? Then say yes and take the first step. Strategy 7. Targeted negativity. Most of us are taught to focus on positivity when trying to take action. We're told to visualize success, stay optimistic, and believe in ourselves. While there's certainly value in a positive mindset, sometimes the pressure to be perfect or achieve a flawless outcome can create more stress and hesitation. That's where the targeted negativity strategy comes in. By embracing failure, you remove the pressure of perfection and free yourself to act without overthinking. The concept is simple. Start with the expectation that you'll fail and do it anyway. Tell yourself, I'll start this task and I'll do a terrible job, and that's okay. This approach may sound strange, but it works by lowering the stakes. When you deliberately remove the pressure to succeed, you bypass the fear of failure that often paralyzes you. Why is this effective? Because much of our hesitation stems from perfectionism, the belief that if something isn't done perfectly, it's not worth doing at all. By giving yourself permission to do a bad job, you remove the fear of not meeting high expectations. Ironically, when you let go of the need to be perfect, you often find that the result is much better than you anticipated. Here's a practical way to apply targeted negativity. 1. Acknowledge the fear. Before starting a task, identify the fear that's holding you back. Are you afraid your work won't be good enough? Are you worried about being judged? Recognize that this fear exists, but don't let it control you. 2. Set a low bar. Deliberately lower your expectations by saying, I'm going to do this badly, and that's fine. For example, if you're procrastinating on writing, commit to writing a messy first draft without worrying about grammar, structure, or style. 3. Take action immediately. Once you've set the expectation that failure is acceptable, start the task without further delay. The goal isn't to succeed perfectly, it's to make progress, no matter how small or imperfect. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're trying to start a workout routine, but you keep putting it off because you feel you're out of shape or won't perform well. Instead of waiting until you feel ready, say to yourself, I'll do this workout and it'll be terrible, but I'm doing it anyway. By accepting that it won't be perfect, you remove the pressure and make it easier to get started. Over time, as you continue taking action, you'll naturally improve. This strategy also works well for creative tasks, such as writing, painting, or brainstorming ideas. The fear of creating something subpar can often block your creativity, but when you start with the mindset that it's okay to produce something imperfect, you open the door to exploration and learning. As Seneca once said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The fear of failure is often worse than the failure itself. By intentionally embracing the possibility of doing a poor job, you strip away that fear and allow yourself to act freely. Over time, this practice builds resilience and reduces your sensitivity to criticism, both from others and yourself. Another benefit of targeted negativity is that it helps you maintain momentum. Once you start, you'll often find that your initial effort wasn't as bad as you imagined, and even if it was, you've already made progress, something you wouldn't have achieved if you had waited for perfect conditions. Here's a quick exercise. The next time you're hesitating on a task, deliberately tell yourself, I'll do this and I'll fail miserably, and that's okay. Then start immediately. The goal isn't to fail forever, It's to reduce the psychological burden of needing to succeed perfectly on your first attempt. In summary, the targeted negativity strategy flips the traditional advice of aiming for perfection. By embracing the possibility of failure, you free yourself from the chains of overthinking and hesitation. Remember, action is what matters, not perfection. Once you start, you can always improve along the way. So, when you find yourself stuck, don't wait for everything to be perfect. Tell yourself, I'll start, and if I fail, I fail. But at least I'll have started. Then take the first step. Because sometimes the best way forward is to embrace imperfection. Strategy 8. Surprise element. Routine can be comforting, but it can also become one of the biggest obstacles to action. When we follow the same patterns day in and day out, tasks can start to feel monotonous, dull, and uninspiring. Over time, this leads to procrastination and resistance. The surprise element strategy helps combat this by introducing spontaneity into your approach, making tasks feel fresh and engaging again. The idea is to break out of your usual routine by spontaneously diving into a small part of the task without prior planning. This unexpected approach catches your brain off guard, stimulates creativity, and removes the mental buildup that often accompanies a task you've been dreading. Think of it like jumping into a cold pool. If you stand at the edge, overthinking how cold the water will be, it becomes harder to take the plunge. But if you surprise yourself by jumping in without hesitation, you bypass the resistance and adapt quickly. Similarly, surprising yourself by starting a task without the usual mental preparation can trigger immediate action. Here's how to apply the surprise element strategy. 1. Pick a random starting point. Instead of approaching a task in your typical sequence, choose a small random part of the task and start there. For example, if you're writing an article, don't start with the introduction. Pick a middle section or even a conclusion and begin writing. 2. Avoid over-planning. Planning is important, but excessive planning can lead to analysis paralysis. With this strategy, the goal is to skip the planning phase and dive straight into action. You can organize and refine later, but the key is to get started without giving your brain time to resist. 3. Make it playful. Approach the task with curiosity and a sense of experimentation. Think, let's see what happens if I just dive into this part. This playful mindset reduces the pressure of doing things perfectly and makes the task feel less like a chore. Let's look at an example. Imagine you need to clean your entire house, but the thought of tackling everything at once feels overwhelming. Instead of following a set plan, walk into a random room and start cleaning a single corner or organizing one drawer. This unexpected approach removes the pressure of completing everything in order and makes it easier to get started. This strategy works well for tasks that require creativity or problem solving. When you introduce an element of surprise, you stimulate your brain in new ways, which can lead to fresh ideas and solutions. It's like shaking a snow globe. Things settle differently, and you see the task from a new perspective. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." By changing your usual approach and embracing spontaneity, you allow yourself to break free from rigid habits that may be limiting your ability to act. Another benefit of the surprise element strategy is that it reduces procrastination by removing the mental build-up associated with a task. When you approach something in the same way repeatedly, your brain starts to associate it with effort, boredom, or difficulty. But by starting unexpectedly and in a different way, you trick your brain into engaging with the task before resistance has a chance to take hold. Here's a quick exercise. Think of a task you've been putting off. Instead of planning how to do it from start to finish, pick a random part of it and start working on that section immediately. Don't worry about whether it makes sense, just focus on taking action. Once you've begun, you'll likely find it easier to continue. In summary, the surprise element strategy is about breaking out of routine and adding spontaneity to your approach. By starting in an unexpected way, you bypass overthinking, stimulate creativity, and make tasks feel more engaging. Remember, action doesn't have to be perfect or linear, it just has to happen. So, next time you feel stuck, don't wait for the right plan or the perfect sequence. Surprise yourself by jumping into a random part of the task and let momentum do the rest. Strategy 9. Start ridiculously small. When you're facing a daunting task, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. The sheer size of the project can make starting seem impossible. You might think, there's too much to do. I don't even know where to begin. This kind of thinking often leads to procrastination. That's where the start ridiculously small strategy comes into play. The idea is to lower the barrier to entry by starting with the tiniest possible action, something so simple that it feels almost ridiculous not to do it. Why does this work? Because our brains tend to exaggerate the difficulty of starting. We imagine all the effort it will take to finish the task, which creates a mental block. But by committing to a ridiculously small step, you trick your brain into thinking, this is easy, I can do that. Once you start, momentum naturally builds, and continuing becomes much easier. Here's a simple way to apply this strategy. 1. Break the task down to its simplest form. If you need to write a report, don't aim to complete the first section. Just open a blank document and type the title. If you need to exercise, don't commit to an entire workout. Just put on your workout clothes and do a single stretch. 2. Commit to doing only that small action. Tell yourself, I'll just do this one small thing. That's it. This removes the pressure of thinking about the entire task and makes it easier to start. 3. Let momentum take over. Often, once you complete the small action, you'll feel a natural urge to continue. That's because starting reduces the mental resistance, making it easier to keep going. Let's take a real-life example. Suppose you've been procrastinating on reading a book. Instead of telling yourself, I need to read for 30 minutes, set a ridiculously small goal. I'll read one sentence. Once you read that sentence, you might find yourself curious about what happens next, and before you know it, you're several pages in. Even if you stop after one sentence, you've succeeded in starting, which is far better than doing nothing at all. This strategy is rooted in the psychological concept of behavioral momentum. Once you initiate a behavior, it becomes easier to continue that behavior. Starting small removes the intimidation factor and allows you to build momentum in a way that feels effortless. Another advantage of starting ridiculously small is that it helps overcome perfectionism. Perfectionists often struggle to start tasks because they feel the need to do everything perfectly from the beginning. By starting with a small, low-stakes action, you bypass the pressure to perform at a high level and give yourself permission to simply begin. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of small actions leading to greater outcomes. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This wisdom reminds us that action, no matter how small, is what truly matters. The smallest step forward is infinitely more valuable than waiting for the perfect moment to take a big leap. Here's a quick exercise. Think of a task you've been putting off. Then ask yourself, what's the smallest possible action I can take right now? It should be so easy that it feels almost laughable. Do that one thing. Once it's done, ask yourself if you want to continue. You might be surprised at how often you'll feel motivated to keep going. In summary, the start ridiculously small strategy is a powerful way to overcome inertia and procrastination by lowering the barrier to action. By focusing on tiny, manageable steps, you remove the intimidation factor and build momentum effortlessly. Remember, the key isn't to finish everything at once. It's to start, no matter how small the step may seem. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed by a task, don't wait for motivation or the perfect plan. Start ridiculously small and let that tiny action be the spark that gets you moving. Strategy 10. Be someone else. Sometimes the hardest part of taking action is getting out of your own head. You might feel stuck because of self-doubt, perfectionism, or simply the fear of failure. When your internal dialogue is full of limiting thoughts like, "I'm not ready," or "What if I mess this up?" it's easy to get paralyzed. The Be Someone Else strategy offers a creative solution to this problem. Instead of approaching the task as yourself, approach it as someone you admire. A fictional character, a mentor, or a role model known for their determination and drive. Why does this work? Because when you take on the mindset of someone else, you bypass your usual limiting beliefs and adopt a more empowered perspective. You're no longer weighed down by your personal fears or doubts. Instead, you're acting as someone who's confident, capable, and decisive. This shift in mindset can be incredibly freeing and often leads to surprising bursts of productivity. Here's how to use the Be Someone Else strategy. 1. Choose your role model. Think of someone who embodies the qualities you need right now, whether it's a historical figure, a fictional hero, or even a friend you admire. For example, if you're struggling with procrastination, you might choose a character like Sherlock Holmes, who is known for his focus and quick action. 2. Ask, what would they do? Once you've chosen your role model, approach the task by asking yourself, what would this person do in my situation? For instance, if you're hesitant to start a presentation, imagine how a charismatic speaker like Steve Jobs would handle it. By shifting your focus to their mindset, you detach from your personal fears and gain a sense of clarity. 3. Act accordingly. After asking what your role model would do, commit to taking action as if you were them. Don't overthink, just act. This playful approach reduces the emotional weight of the task and makes starting feel less intimidating. Let's consider a real-world example. Imagine you're nervous about negotiating a deal. Instead of approaching it with your usual hesitation, try adopting the persona of someone bold and assertive, like a famous entrepreneur or negotiator. Ask yourself, how would they prepare? How would they speak? Then act as if you are that person. Even if it feels strange at first, you'll likely find that this mindset helps you push through the initial resistance and take action with greater confidence. This strategy taps into a psychological principle called role-playing for behavioral change. Research shows that when people take on a role, they often adopt the behaviors and mindset associated with that role. By pretending to be someone else, you give yourself permission to act in ways that might feel unnatural to your usual self, but are necessary for progress. Marcus Aurelius expressed a similar idea when he wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." By deliberately choosing thoughts and behaviors aligned with a more empowered persona, you can transform how you approach challenges. Over time, The qualities you borrow from your role model can become part of your natural mindset. Another benefit of the Be Someone Else strategy is that it adds an element of fun to tasks that might otherwise feel stressful. Instead of dreading the task, you're engaging in a playful mental exercise, which reduces anxiety and makes action feel more approachable. Here's a quick exercise. Think of a task you've been avoiding. Now choose a role model who would handle that task effortlessly. Close your eyes, imagine yourself as that person, and ask, what would they do right now? Then, act immediately, without second-guessing yourself. Even if you don't fully believe it at first, acting as if can help you build momentum and break free from hesitation. In summary, the Be Someone Else strategy leverages the power of imagination to help you take action. By temporarily stepping into the shoes of someone confident and capable, you bypass your usual fears and self-doubt, making it easier to start. Over time, you'll find that the qualities you admire in others begin to show up naturally in your own behavior. So, the next time you feel stuck, don't approach the task as yourself. Instead, channel the mindset of someone you admire and ask, what would they do? Then act accordingly, because sometimes all it takes to move forward is a little imagination and a change in perspective. Taking action is rarely about waiting for the perfect moment or feeling 100% ready. It's about learning how to push through resistance, break down mental barriers, and create momentum, even when you don't feel motivated. The truth is, hesitation is part of the human experience, but you don't have to let it control you. With the right strategies, you can train yourself to act, no matter the circumstances. In this episode, we've explored 10 powerful strategies to help you take action. From embracing rejection, setting time limits, and starting ridiculously small, to using creativity, spontaneity, and even stepping into the mindset of someone else. These strategies aren't about perfection, they're about progress. Each small step forward, no matter how imperfect, moves you closer to your goals. The key takeaway? Action creates its own energy. You don't need to wait for motivation or inspiration to strike. Start now, no matter how small the effort, and let momentum build. Whether you choose to break tasks into tiny actions, eliminate distractions, or surprise yourself by diving right in, the most important thing is to begin. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your mind is your greatest tool, and by mastering it, you can overcome hesitation, build resilience, and create the life you want." So, which of these strategies resonates with you the most? Try one today and see how it transforms your approach to action. Remember, every small step counts, and starting, no matter how imperfectly, is the hardest yet most important part. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, keep taking those small, bold steps toward the future you desire. See you in the next episode.